les amis! This video today is for you if you are someone who really wants to make a commitment to learning French or really any language of your choice. So if you're someone who is, mildly interested in learning a new language and maybe you're going to be traveling somewhere and you just want to learn a few words, this is probably not the video for you. This is a deeper dive into my tips for how to continually improve and motivate yourself through all the difficult phases of learning a language, even at a more advanced level. Some things that I do on a daily or weekly basis to keep myself constantly challenged and improving. Before we get into it, let me just say also that I do have a newsletter. It's free, and I talk all about my life in France, inspiration, what it's like to live here, French culture, some tips for French travel, all kinds of good stuff. So if you like, just click on over and come and join our community. We would love to have you. And now let's get right into it. Number one may seem obvious, but it's something that I cannot stress enough in language learning at no matter what level. And that is that, using myself as an example, I work on my French language every single day. Now you may say, those of you who know a little bit about me, well, Karen, you live in Paris, so duh, you have a chance to speak French every day. Your husband is French, your family is French. This is true. I have lived in France for nearly 2 years now, and I had studied French for a long time before that. But the fact is that, my family, while they help me a lot, they are not my teachers. And I have to dedicate myself to working on my language so that I can continue to improve both in my understanding of what they're all saying to me and for the knowledge that I need to participate in society here, whether it's doing things for myself with the French administration or also within my family or my friend group. If we're doing cultural activities, if we're going to a movie, there's not always subtitles available. So I work on my French every single day. Now, what does that mean? It could be something very simple. It could be 5 minutes that I'm listening to part of a podcast. It could be me picking up a French magazine and just reading through it and really focusing on, okay, I understand the context of this, but do I understand every single word in this short text? And if not, maybe I'll look up a word and then I'll run that word through my vocabulary, try to use it, something like that, to kind of imprint it on myself, right? So I'm doing something. I'm writing an email in French. Any little thing, and it doesn't have to be like an hour or an hour and a half commitment. It can be 5-10 minutes. It may be talking to myself in French, by the way, and that's my next point. I talk to myself in French tout le temps. Tout le temps, je me parle en français parce que franchement, ça m'aide beaucoup. That helps me a lot to really integrate new phrases that I want to learn. So let's say that I learned something new and it's a little bit awkward or difficult for me. I'll just walk around my house saying it. Cela n'était pas du tout ce à quoi je m'attendais. That's a phrase that trips me up to this day. So I'll just walk around saying it. And I highly recommend talking to yourself, pretending to have conversations with yourself. You're not crazy. And in this day and age, when everyone's talking to themselves on a cell phone anyway, you can even do it out in public. You know what? If it makes you better at the language you're trying to learn, it's worth it. Just do it. Okay, so that's my number 2 tip. Talk to yourself. Just talk to yourself. Okay, number 3. This is one of the most important tips that I can give you, and it's something that I do all the time. I throw myself into extremely uncomfortable situations with my French language. And now you may say, well, Karen, you have a DELF C1 diploma. How can you be in uncomfortable situations? Well, believe me, it's completely possible, because even when you have a certificate or some sort of academic qualification, daily life, specific transactions, situations that are not in your normal vocabulary, these are everywhere to be found, and they're somewhat easily avoided. If you want to avoid them, I have plenty of friends who are avoiding them every single day. Me, no. I'm the person who dives right in. You can see from my other videos, I decided to get my driver's license in French, and for example, the first part of the driving exam is a written test. you can have a translator in English or whatever language, or at least in some languages, with you for the test. I said, no, I'm doing it in French, and it was really hard. And I failed the first time, but I got it on the second time. The road test, another story. There's a whole series of videos on that if you're interested. But I, for example, went to a one-woman show in French with my husband, comedy show, brilliant actress. You know, the whole crowd was just like laughing at, you know, every 15 seconds I was, and, you know, even at my level, so difficult for me because this show was filled with jokes. It was filled with cultural references, movie references, politicians, like all kinds of stuff that, you know, I just haven't heard of. And so I was just really struggling and on the outside, but although it upset me to feel like I didn't get more than maybe 60% of what was going on, I also felt really good for having tried, and I committed that I want to do that more often. So my husband will say, for example, oh, I found a movie for us tonight, but there's no subtitles. And I tell him, it doesn't matter, I'll try, you know, I'm gonna do my very best. And by the way, subtitles, I don't watch with English subtitles. I would just watch with French subtitles so that I could pick up bits of slang or just little turns of phrase that I might not know as a learning tool. But you know what? We watch TV all the time with no subtitles, and I feel my French getting better and better all the time as a result of just forcing myself to talk to someone that I don't want to talk to. Or I'll give you another example. I have an accountant here in France, a French accountant, and I told him from day one, I know he speaks perfect English. He's French, but he speaks English because they have a lot of American clients, and I told them, never speak to me in English. Even if I don't understand something, please try to explain it to me in French. And then I told my French teacher I want a list of French accounting vocabulary so I can try to get myself up to speed there and just try. And believe me, this is like the worst for me because I don't like talking about accounting in English at all. I get like a little rash. But I just said I have to try to do this. And so when I write him an email, when I talk to him about issues coming up, I do it in French. And so I'm not saying you do everything in French, and you may not be in a position to be able to do that in your daily life if you don't live in France or you're not actively working with French people. But the point is, when you can, you know, if you hear someone speaking French, you go right over to them and start speaking French to them. If you have a chance to join a meetup group, whatever you can do, throw yourself in and don't be afraid. Just do it. You'll see it will really help you. And it'll make you a badass too. Picking up on that, my next tip is to really use the internet to help you in your French language or any language learning. And I mean, when I started learning French, there was no internet. I know, it's hard to believe. I take advantage every single day of, for example, all of the amazing teachers on Instagram who just do these short little snippets where they teach you a phrase, or, you know, all the little filler words like boof. Is so much that you can learn to enhance your language learning from just taking a look at those or listening to short podcasts. I'm going to put some of my favorite online resources. I have them in some of my other videos, and I'll put some other ones in the description today in the hopes that they might help you. But I suggest you take advantage of like meetup groups. There are lots of online meetup groups where you can practice conversation. There are people online who want to do an exchange of like, they'd like to practice their English. You'd like to practice your French. You can do 10 minutes of English, 10 minutes of French, and help each other. These things don't have to cost a lot of money, but I think it's very important to try to interact, whether that's, you know, training your ear or whether that is getting out there and speaking and just, you know, getting more into it, just getting your feet wet. And then even if you're a more advanced speaker, you just put yourself into more of those situations too, not just introducing yourself and saying what you do in the same, you know, story that you tell everyone all the time that you're comfortable with, but talking about things that force you to use other tenses or search for those pronouns or put yourself in a different register, more formal or less formal, all those kind of things. So use the internet. Okay, my next tip, I lost track of the count of the tips. My next tip is to sign up for newsletters. And I'll put one or two of my favorite newsletters in the description. These are great because typically these are just amazing teachers who spend a ton of time putting together all kinds of content. Oftentimes it's seasonal, so you're learning about like what's going on culturally in France or in the French language, you know, holidays and traditions and things like that, but also with lessons on idiomatic expressions, which are everywhere in French and in every language, frankly. And so signing up for newsletters is great. and I find it really, really helpful. And there are some who even have amazing tools. There's a newsletter that I love called, I think it's lawlessfrench.com. It's just wonderful. I don't have any relationship with them except for that I love the tools that they've created. My favorite is something called the subjunctivizer, and it's a tool which, if you are learning French at an intermediate level, you probably know about the subjunctive, which is like, it's a whole thing. And I'm fascinated by it. So she basically made a tool where you can look up any phrase and whether or not it needs a subjunctive. Okay, here's another really big one for me, and that is taking classes. And there's all kinds of things you can do with apps, with these online meetups, but there's something about having a teacher who is putting you through your paces, whether it's in a group, whether it's an online, Zoom class, whatever it may be. But even at my level, and again, you may say, well, you have a husband, why can't he just correct you? Well, believe me, he does, and he's very generous, but he's not my teacher. And it's kind of like having someone who's just on your side, helping you. You can be kind of not selfish, but you can be very involved in what you want and need to improve. One thing I've done over the years, I've always had a French teacher in addition to all the just individual study that I try to do and my practical, speaking out in the world. And having my own teacher is just so great because I can choose an objective. Maybe it is a particular goal, like an academic goal that I'm working on. Maybe it is just to improve my daily conversation. And so I really want someone that I can have a conversation with who will talk to me for like 25-30 minutes and then note down all of my mistakes and, present those back to me with better options or with why this word might be better than that word, or how this kind of, is a little tweak you could make to sound more elegant. Or, hey, wow, that turn of phrase you used, surprised me a little bit. Why did you say that? All these kind of things that, you're not necessarily getting that kind of feedback from someone in your daily conversation. And then if you want to work on your writing, just anything, listening practice, where you have to listen to short snippets and tell the teacher what you understood. These are all great practices to help increase your ability and your confidence. And it's also a chance to speak, because most French teachers are not going to speak to you in English. They're going to speak to you in French, and you're going to try to understand. And this is what you want. This is what you want. For the last, 10 years, I have never spoken a single word of English with any of my French teachers. Even if I don't know what I'm trying to say, I just explain it with the French words that I have. It's c'est le truc que tu fais, blah, blah, blah. Then I get to the point. But having a teacher is something that I would definitely recommend that you do. It doesn't have to be a private teacher. Could be in a small group setting, could be in person, could be on Zoom. There's a lot out there that you can do to find that teaching community that works for you, but I really recommend that you do it. And my last tip for today, which is something that I do a lot, and it's incorporated in all these other tips that I've given you, but it's really important, and it's not something I thought about until later in my French language journey, and that is learning about French culture. And so what does that mean? It means watching television series that are made in France with French stars. It is maybe dipping into a little bit of what French politics are, who's in the conversation there, what's going on right now in the French news. And that can be as simple as watching French news on YouTube for a few minutes a day. Or watching movies, learning a little bit about well-known French writers, poets, this type of thing. These things will help you so much, especially when you get to a point where you're going beyond just, ordering in a restaurant or describing what you do for a living or just meeting new people. When you really start to get into having conversations, these cultural references, you will be shocked at how many times they pop up in conversations, and you'll be like, oh, okay, j'ai la ref. And it's such a good feeling when you can start to get the jokes or be able to nod your head, okay, yeah, I know who he's talking about. And so I strongly encourage you to do a little bit of that along with just your basic language skills, because it will enrich your language, your comprehension, your listening, and just your being able to really participate in conversations with French people. Okay, everybody, I think that's it for today. I really hope these tips have helped you. If they did, how about giving us a little thumbs up and a follow so you'll know when new videos come out. Like I said earlier in the video, come on over and join up with my free newsletter talking all about life in France, how I met a French man in the middle of the pandemic in Paris and picked up my whole life from New York to move to France and start over again. Voilà, je pense que c'est tout. Merci d'être venu et bonne continuation les amis. À bientôt.